Hey AP Micro, I just want to give you a quick introduction video to our next unit on monopolies. Now you're going to need to read the next chapter in our textbook, chapter 15, in order to get a handful of the details and the subtleties for a firm that's producing as a monopoly, but I can sum it up pretty quickly. It's a firm that is the only firm selling that product. So in perfect competition, any firm was called a price taker because the price was set in the market. A monopoly is different because a monopolist, a firm that's the only firm selling that product, is a price maker. A price maker. They can set the price. They have control. There are some pieces that come in as to what qualifies a firm as a monopoly. In perfect competition, we had free entry. In a monopoly, there are barriers to entry. You can check out chapter 15 to get all of those details down. But I want to give you a couple of basic graphical pieces to help you along the way. First, I have good news. A monopoly firm has the same marginal cost and the same average total cost as all the firms that we've looked at. So here's quantity and here's price. But here's what's different. If you remember with perfect competition, the market we used to graph here, and we would take that given price and come right across. But in this demand curve that we used to have for perfect competition, the monopoly firm is the only firm. So they see or they face the entire demand curve. There's our demand curve. So a monopoly, same marginal cost, same average total cost, but they see the entire demand curve. I'm going to write a chart over here to talk a little bit about what the demand curve is. I'm going to give us an equation that the demand curve tells us the price and quantity relationship. So I'm going to make a simple equation, 2 times Q plus 20. That's the relationship between price and quantity. I'm going to write a little table here. I'm using nice, easy numbers. Demand curve, again, it's the relationship between price and quantity. At this price, how many of a product do people demand? At that price, how many do people demand? If you want to sell this many, well, that better be the price. So here's a numerical table. If I sell 0, what should the price be? Just plugging into this equation. 20. If the price is 20, no one will buy any. But if I lower the price by $2 to $18, one person will buy. I keep going, 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4. Price goes down by 2, the quantity is going to go up. Or thinking about slope, if quantity goes up by 1, the price goes down by 2. But here's what's important, and here's the piece that's difficult about a monopoly. This demand curve does not equal the marginal revenue for a firm like it did in perfect competition. Because in order to sell one more, the firm, the monopoly, has to lower the price. It has to lower the price for all of the goods. If I can sell to 2 people for $16, and I say, you know what, I want to sell to a third person, I need to sell to everybody at this lower price. That's a big concept for monopolies and what differentiates it from perfect competition where the price was the marginal revenue. Here, the price is not the marginal revenue because I can't just say, well, it's $16 for you, $14 for you, and $12 for you. I have to set one price. Imagine if you walked into a coffee shop and the person looked at you and said, well, it looks like you're willing to spend $20 on a cup of coffee, so you have to spend $20. And the person next to you only has to spend $4 because that's what it seems like their what price that they would buy a cup of coffee at. I'm going to show you this numerically. Revenue. Revenue is price times quantity. 20 times 0. 18 times 1. 16 times 2. This column is the revenue that a firm brings in. It sells one more, and it brings in now a total of $32, then $42, then $48, then $50, then $48. How come the revenue is going down? They're selling more, but at a lower price. Would you rather sell a lot of a product for a low price, think like Walmart or Target, or would you rather sell not many for a high price, think of like a high-end store or a high-end brand? Like always, we think as economists on the margin. We are marginal thinkers. So let's look at the marginal revenue. Change in revenue for selling one more. Okay, when I sell the first one, I bring in $18 more. I sell the next one. I bring in $14 more. I sell the next one. I bring in $10 more. Before I fill the rest of this out, I'm going to pause and explain a bit. Okay, I sell one more, and the price is 14. Shouldn't my marginal revenue be 14? That's a common question that people have. But it's not, because in order to sell one more, you had to sell this person who was willing to spend $18. You had to sell it to them for $14. This person who was willing to spend $16, you had to sell it to them for the new price of $14. So sure, you bring in $14 more from that extra sale, but you lose a couple of dollars from these sales. Continues. What's the marginal revenue? 42 to 48 is 6. 2, negative 2. Now you're selling one more, but you're bringing in less revenue than you did before. Remember, we've looked at how we maximize something. Here's price equals negative 2Q plus 20. That's just the demand curve. But remember that revenue is price times quantity. Price, just replacing price with the equation, times Q. I'm going to distribute that in. So revenue is, again, I'm just distributing this Q in because it's price times quantity. Parabola. A negative coefficient. Here's a simple sketch of the revenue curve for a firm. Remember that these little bitty slopes or slopes at a point are called the marginal revenue. The revenue is at its maximum when that little bitty slope is 0. And that's called the marginal revenue. If you were in calculus class, that's called the derivative. But the marginal revenue is how the revenue changes. The marginal revenue is positive, the marginal revenue is 0, and the marginal revenue is negative. Well, that's what we see here. Here's a special piece, and if we had AP microeconomics that included calculus, I would do what's called take the derivative. If anybody has taken a derivative before, if you're in a calculus class, you can do that with this equation to come up with an equation for marginal revenue, but I need to show you in my chart and graphically what happens with marginal revenue. I have this equation for demand. That's where I get my price and quantity multiplied to get revenue, and subtracted to get marginal revenue. This equation is right here. This is a linear relationship between price and quantity. As quantity goes up, the price goes down. But look at the slope of marginal revenue. Marginal revenue goes down by 4. If we make a couple of assumptions, specifically that demand is linear, then the marginal revenue will always also be linear with a slope that's twice as steep. And that's the big step. If this was calculus, I could show you right here an equation for the marginal revenue. For anybody in calculus following at home, that would be minus 4q plus 20. This is a leap. This is calculus based, not on the AP exam. But what is that marginal revenue decreases faster than the price has to decrease. Let me give you some concept again why. The marginal revenue, how much more money you bring in, goes down faster because when you lower the price to sell more, you have to lower the price for everybody. When you lower the price to sell more, you have to lower the price for everybody. That's why our revenue goes up slower and slower, and eventually comes down. So our marginal revenue is decreasing by twice as much. That's a 12-minute video for what a monopoly firm, what their graph looks like in terms of their production. Marginal cost, average total cost, demand, and marginal revenue. The good news is that just like for a firm in perfect competition, this is our base graph for any monopoly. We can then utilize the same information. There's nothing crazy new here once we get this marginal revenue and demand plotted on the same graph, because when does a firm maximize profit? Same rule applies. When marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This is the point at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the quantity that maximizes profit for a monopoly firm. Here's where it gets tougher. Monopoly wants to sell that many. What should it do? You're going to be tempted to say this is the price, but it's not. This is not the price. To find the price to sell that many, we have to go all the way up to the demand curve. That's what the demand curve tells us, the relationship between price and quantity. That point is the price that people are willing to pay to buy that many. If the price was higher, people would buy less. If the price was lower, people would buy more. But in order for the monopoly to say, that's how many I want to sell, they're trying to equate their marginal revenue and marginal cost. They need to sell for that price. Price times quantity, this blue rectangle, shows us the total revenue, price times quantity, and quantity times average total cost, the same thing we did in perfect competition. Give us a big rectangle of the total cost. And we're left with a big chunk of profit. There's a lot going on there. Demand, the fact that the monopoly faces the entire demand curve. The biggest component is that the marginal revenue decreases twice as fast as the demand curve. Here's the slope of demand curve, and the slope of the marginal revenue is steeper, in fact, twice as steep. And then we use the same fundamentals from perfect competition. We set marginal revenue equal marginal cost to find the quantity. Go all the way up to the demand curve to see, well, what price should we set that at? Determine our profit by looking at the big revenue rectangle, subtracting the total cost rectangle, and we have a monopoly making a lot of profit. There are barriers to entry for a monopoly, so no other firm is going to come in and grind this profit down to zero like it did with imperfect competition. The monopoly gets to keep this nice blue box of profit, and that's why firms engage in research and development to create a new product that only they can sell. That's why firms apply for patents, so they're the only ones that can sell a certain good. That's why if you have a specific land resource like oil, you want to exploit that and be the only seller of oil. That's what OPEC does, or tries to do at least, is create a monopoly to be the only one. That's why you want to create unique features of what you can offer to the job market. So you can say, I have a monopoly over these skills. Why? Because you can hold on to this big chunk of profit. There's plenty more with monopolies, but I hope this video at least gives us an introduction and get the details reading our chapter 15.